All right, 3, 2, 1, we're live.
All right, we are live, episode 31. Thank you guys for joining us again for another episode.
31.
With our beautiful voices and our interesting experiences.
Every time we talk about pretty well, I'm like, oh, hello.
Dude, I was just listening to a podcast the other day, like an earlier one from somebody else. And I'm like, dude, their new stuff sounds so good. I didn't realize until I went and watched one of their old ones. I'm like, man, that audio sucks. I was like, this audio is pretty good.
Yeah, man. It's a trip. When you're in it, you're like, oh, it's good, whatever. I think when you're in it and it's your shit, you're like, oh, like you're more, you're hard on yourself. Like it doesn't sound good. But to other person, like it's just the value that they're giving away, right? But
Yeah.
when you hear it like switch up, you're like, oh, production on their side for the win.
I know, man. Dude, that's a funny lesson. I think that's a very important lesson that I had to learn is like, because that's, I was just at an entrepreneur group event. Kale and Trevor from Real Business Owners, they invited me up to their business event last week in Orange County. And it was awesome, but listen to a lot of the guys, talk about what their issues were, their problems they're facing in their business. They all agreed that, Instagram or social media or being out there and developing a personal brand was useful, but they felt they didn't know where to start and they felt like I'm never comfortable doing it. I don't feel like I'm good enough. I'm like, bro, I have never released a single video where I'm like, I look at it, I'm like, fuck, I nailed it. Nailed it. Every time I'm like, fuck, man, I look like an idiot. I sound stupid. I'm like, well, fuck it. We're going. Doing it live, dude.
Man.
Because like you're never happy with yourself.
Yeah.
But that's interestingly enough, this point that we're talking about, the one that we're talking about here, episode 31, I was looking at one of my previous videos that I did from, dude, it was only 5 years ago.
Yeah.
I was playing it before. I'm like, wow, what a nerd, dude. I'm like, who is this pencil neck? And it was a video on like, discussing like investors and compensation packages and stuff. And I was like, dude, it's not that I was wrong. It's just that number one, I look like a total dork. but also I just didn't have the experience that I have now to know the nuances and the different options of what were available.
Right.
But also too, I hope I look at this podcast in 5 years and be like, man, I look so much better now in 5 years than I did then, because that means I'm progressing.
Right.
And I've talked about, man, I didn't know shit on this episode. Awesome, because that means I learned so much in the next 5 years.
That's why, like, we talked about it last episode, but like just having this for like, we plan on doing this for like a while, right? For a long time.
Ever.
And it's just like the aspect of we get to look back on this. I'm going to look back on it because like this is why we started it, because I was like a more greeny side into the entrepreneur with you. And I want to look back in the next couple of years and be like, you child, you little entrepreneur, you like, wow.
Well, that's good, man.
Yeah.
That means you're progressing. Imagine how sad it would be if you look back in 5 years and be like, oh man, I was so good. I was in such good shape 5 years ago. I was doing so well. You're like, no, man, you should be doing better.
Yeah.
I was like 205 5 years ago. And I was like, I didn't realize how skinny I was.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like 235 now. I'm like,
Fuck
man,
yeah.
I sit on that guy.
I'll sit on that
guy. Man, I came out bad.
It's yourself.
But anyway, I'm glad this is 30 good pounds. I'm happy with that.
So 31, man. Episode 31. What were you doing at 31?
Ooh, I think Mike and I were I think we're in year 2 or 3 of building Forged. And we're just like figuring shit out. Like, I think we just come out from a nosedive of almost burying the company. We just started to get traction. I think that was probably the first time where like I saw, and this is a big thing for any brand owner, like it's all your friends and everything, your friends and family buy your shirt, but every brand owner I've ever talked to always remember the first time they saw somebody else wearing their shirt that they didn't know. I think it was a couple years in where I saw somebody walking down the street wearing a Ford shirt and I was like, I didn't know them. And I walked by them and they didn't know me. I was like, yes, dude. That means like it's validation that like other people actually like this shit. It's not just me and my friends are like, oh yeah, whatever, we'll just buy it. It's like other people actually thought that we were doing is cool. I remember that being like, I don't know, it's a key thing.
Yeah, man.
But it's funny that like every apparel brand owner has that, they remember that same moment. It's pretty cool.
Damn.
But yeah,
sick.
31 is basically still trying to get my shit together. I feel that way now though, 44. Still trying to get my shit together. I don't know if that ever ends, dude. I think if you have big goals, I don't know if that ever fucking ends.
Yeah, man. Damn, that's crazy.
Yeah, here, why don't you read the question?
All right, so today's topic, episode 31, I had a question for Ryan. It was more about giving the percentage away of a company, right? You maybe in the beginning, right, to pay employees or to get them more on board with the vision of the company, or even to investors, right? You want to give a certain amount away where it's just like you hop on now, your pay might be really little, but I'll give you a percentage of this company, and maybe in the next 4 years you'll get a total of 5. So it's like I just more curious about percentage of giving away.
Yeah, I think that depends on the type of company you have. Like that's a really popular structure with tech companies, but tech companies are completely different valuation. Well, it's a completely different type of financial model. So tech companies are based on uh, uh, valuation. So you could have a company valued at $350 million. How much revenue do you think they're actually doing? Like 5 million.
Yeah.
So you can have a 70x multiple on revenue. That's not like profit, because that company is actually losing millions and millions of dollars a year.
Yeah.
But so that's what I mean. It's like Twitter valued at what, 45 whatever billions and billions of dollars. It's never actually made money. It's never actually been profitable at all. So there's a lot of these tech companies that, for whatever reason, it's a weird business model. Like maybe I just don't understand why they're valuable. But so tech companies are based on valuation. So if you have that and you're not really worried about like profit per se, it's totally different, because you can give away, like Apple is doing that in the beginning, like hiring developers above their weight class and like paying them in stock options and things like that. And there's a lot of eight-figure employees of Apple that have massive amounts of money from just being an employee of Apple. In fact, I think there's a famous story about the masseuse that they had at the time who, I forget if she took it or not, but basically they were offering her stock options or pay. I think she took the stock options, and that was ended up being like tens of millions of dollars, for being a masseuse at this place. So tech companies are so different. I think but that's all everybody hears about, because those are like the unicorn models. But I don't think it's a realistic model for an e-com business to start with, or a product business to start with, because most of those business models are based on a completely different financial structures that you have to be profitable to keep the company going. You know what I mean? Because otherwise, the tech companies basically seed round, get money to start, growth round, get money, and you eventually sell it, hopefully to an enterprise level person, which is basically a publicly held company. And it's a different animal, completely. So applying those metrics of giving away equity to our business or your business, I don't think it applies, because there's no situation where I think it's a good move at all.
Part of this question came up is because I watched the show. It's new. Jared Leto and Anne Hathaway. It's called We Crashed. It's about WeWork. The whole building of how it became a $47 billion company, and the next I think it was a couple of weeks it went back down to $7 billion. But like you said, I think it's that tech company, right? But his was a real estate thing. He made offices, but they
had an interesting model.
But he knew that to get to that what he wanted, it had to be a tech company, which it's really not. No one agreed that it was tech. But he still went that route and made it that way to get those seed rounds of billions of dollars. It's crazy.
Yeah, so it sounds like they kind of operate in the financial structure of a tech company, even though they're more like a brokerage or a whatever it's called. But yeah, that's an odd one. So aside from the unicorn tech and the odd outliers, I think if somebody's going to start, like you and I would start normal businesses, I don't think it's... The only times I think it makes sense to give up equity is if you have a partner that comes in, or if you have an investor that comes in. I think, especially in the beginning, anybody that comes in as an employee, if they're not, if you can pay, and even a partner, if the only thing they bring to the table is they're willing to do the work, awesome, pay them. Because equity is the most expensive thing you could ever give up on a company, right? I don't know what our valuation is, but we actually had 2 of our employees ask for a percentage of our company a couple of years ago. And I told them, look, man, we're 5 years in, we're not a startup and we're not a tech company, and we're not publicly held. Those are really the only business models where I would consider giving you percentage of ownership. And at the time, they're like, basically, well, fuck you, I quit. Like literally left that day. But that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
That was one of them was that CFO that I was telling you about that totally fucked us. So anyway, talk about overvaluing your fucking self. But that was what his thing. And he wanted 8% of the company vested over 4 years. And I'm like, bro, that's not like, you weren't here the first 5 years. We were grinding on this stuff, dude. You come in and we're stable and we're growing and you want percentage of this? Like, no, man, I'll pay you more. It was already your highest paid employee. I'm like, dude, I'll pay you, a lot more next year. But like equity is not on the table here. We could do profit sharing, all that. But that got me thinking about what the options were and kind of exploring this with like some of my other friends that own companies and everything. I was like, fuck, man, was I wrong for not doing that? Because I had the same thoughts. I'm like, dude, if this guy and our other employee thinks that that's a reasonable ask, I'm like, dude, am I being a dick by not doing that? It was kind of weird. But through asking my friends in my network, I realized, like, oh no, I was totally right. They're just being weirdos.
Well, I also think they don't understand the business model, right? Because you said that's the most expensive thing to give away, right? So if it's your first 60 days in business and you're like, fuck, okay, whatever, I'll give you 5% over the next 5 years, right? So now it's 5 years. That person has 5%. You have 95, right? And it's just kind of like it's worth a lot more now.
Well,
but you want to buy. Now
in.
You have to buy out.
They didn't even want to buy in. They wanted me to give it to them.
But
I'm like, bro, like say we're worth $1 million.
Yeah.
Right? 8% would be worth, $80,000. So if I give him 8% and whatever, so the problem with equity is they own it no matter what. So he could work for 4 years, get vested, get the 8%, and then literally fuck off and not do anything. And I still have to pay him. Or if I'm like, bro, you're not doing any more work, you got to leave, I have to buy him out. So if our valuation is $1 million and he owns 8%, I have to pay him $80,000 to get my 8% back. You know what I mean? So it's very, I don't know. I think it causes a lot of problems. And I don't think that for most employees, that's not really their vision anyway. Most of them would rather get paid more and have the freedom to leave and have like, they don't really want to own a business because now you're, what if we're negative? Do they not get paid? You know what I mean? Like, there's months in the industry, like Archive's very stable, but there's months in the industry we'll be up a couple $100,000 and the next month we're down a couple $100,000. So if we're doing, an equity thing, I'm like, dude, you only get the upside? You only get paid when I make money and you don't get paid, like, but you still want to get paid when I don't make money? Like, that makes no sense. And that's why profit sharing, I think, so anybody who wants equity as an employee, and you're not a tech company, not this other stuff, you're ran like a normal business, I don't think it's a good option because there's so many ways it can go bad and there's only one way it can go good. The one way it goes good is cool. He puts in more time and more effort and he's answering phone calls or whatever, like a little more ownership of it. But honestly, if you just paid him more, he'd probably do the same thing, without all the drawbacks. So one of the things we're looking at is creating a profit share because that's really what I think kind of like the best of both worlds, where you get them to pay attention. You get them to look at the business like an owner, and the owner should be looking at the net profit. Like gross is nice, but net's really what you need. So in order to do that, they have to have buy-in on this. So we're looking at ways that we can do that with parts of the company, and I think that might work. We haven't solidified it yet, but it's definitely a possibility on the table. And I think in most situations, that would be the number one option. If you're going to do anything, profit sharing or bonuses or whatever. But I really think that there's very few situations where actual equity would be good. If they're not a founder, not an investor, or just an employee, honestly, just pay them more. That's it.
What would you need right now if someone said, like, how do I say this? Even a person that's first starting out in apparel or just like the companies that we have, when should someone get an investor? And then like, what would you be in for right now to get an investor? Like where it would make sense for you and also someone that's brand new?
Yeah. So I think if you're going to get an investor, you have to understand what that entails because unless they're like your mom or somebody, they're not going to just give you, here's 50 grand, go have fun. Like, pay me back when you can.
Some people.
Be nice if I got a little interest. Like, it's not like that. Like,
Yeah.
nobody, even people with millions of dollars, are not just going to give you 50 grand and be like, cool, have fun. Let me know how it goes. Like, there's going to be compensation. There's going to be timelines. There's going to be deliverables. And there should be, because there's always strings attached to all this stuff. And I think it's very useful if you have the type of business that needs funding to start. I personally try to run all my stuff as bootstrapped as possible. And things like apparel is really easy to bootstrap because the initial investment is pretty low, like only a couple grand. And you can start it and get a website and get sales, and you can use those sales to grow. It's very linear, whereas the infrastructure side, the fulfillment side, is not that way. It cost me $250,000 to, over the last 2 years to even build it, because we have to get the warehouse, we have to buy the shelving, we have to hire the people, we have to pay $2,000 a month for the tech system that we use on the back end. Like, it's expensive, dude. And until you get it big enough to where it's spinning off enough profit to pay that stuff, you're just negative. So that's why I built it. Yeah, and it works now, but it cost $250,000 to get there. So if you have a business model like that you need, say, $250,000, and you don't have it, you might have to give up equity to get somebody in there. But you still have to sell them the vision on, hey, yeah, you're going to give me $250,000 for whatever percentage of the company, but my goal with that is I want to sell it for X amount and, X amount of years from now. Then they're like, cool, I'll invest $250,000 with the expected return amount on a certain return date. And they're going to hold you to it. And they're going to look at like monthly or quarterly evaluations and where you're at and your hiring practices and your P&Ls. And that's reasonable. If they're a really good investor, hopefully they'll almost act like a partner and they'll help you. Because there's like, you don't want to just take a check from somebody.
Yeah, you want
useless,
that partner. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Like, oh, cool. Here's $250,000. Don't talk to me for 5 years until you sell. Like, there's some businesses, that's useful. But if you're just starting out, chances are that you need somebody to kind of help guide you on that. So if you can find a person who has the money, but more important than that, has expertise or experience or connections within the realm that you're trying to build, that's so much more powerful than just money. Because you can get money lots of places, but to find somebody who can help you actually scale that is even better. And the really good investors usually only invest in things that they can have a hand in, like legitimately helping a lot. The problem with that is, like, say you have no money, you're giving up $250,000, they're probably going to ask for 90% equity in the company. Yeah. So that's the problem, because they're putting up $250,000.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But if you come in and say, oh, I'm putting up, 125, and you put up 125, cool. Maybe they'll ask for 50 or 60 or whatever it happens to be. But there's capital, there's time, and there's expertise. And you have to have those to build anything. So if you only have one, expect to give up the other, but it's really what you and the other person decide. I personally have not taken on any investors in my stuff, but I've been an investor in a few things before, and unfortunately, it's never gone well. And that's probably my fault for not like setting expectations ahead of time. For instance, there's 2 companies where I was like, cool, well, because our infrastructure is built around building and scaling apparel lines. So I was like, cool, it came to me with an idea. One instance, guy came to me with an idea. I'm like, cool, this is a good idea. Like, I think this will work. And he's willing to put in the time, didn't have any money. But because this is all we do, we could grow it pretty fast without like costing a whole lot. So I was like, cool, man, like I'll put in, we ended up scaling it from literally nothing to getting the trademarks, getting the website, getting like everything, the emails, like everything set up. And cost me about, we did photo shoots and it was a legit website. It looked like it was, and product, it looked good. It was like rolling, and then we're doing advertising and it was scaling. And I remember we did our first drop. And I was like, it cost me $20,000 to get all that done. Like, that's what I paid out of pocket. And the deal was I'd own 40%, and then we'd, work on selling it in 4 to 5 years and then growing it. And what happened was, and again, this is probably my fault for not setting proper expectations. But we did the first launch and sold like, $2,000 of the stuff. And at the time, this guy, I I didn't realize how fucking dumb he really was. I was like, oh, he's a business owner. He's got this stuff, but he'd never actually partnered with anybody before. So I didn't know how shitty he was actually running things. So he thought that so basically we sold $2,000 of stuff. And he's like, awesome, let's split the profit. You get 800, I get 1,200. I'm like, bro.
Profit?
you understand. We're not $2,000 up. That means we're only negative 18,000.
Yeah.
There is no profit.
Yeah.
And I told you, we're not going to be able to pull any money from this for probably at least a year and a half before it's paid off the investment and it's profitable and then it's rolling. And he's like, oh, I didn't sign up for that. I'm like, what do you I was just going to gift you 20 grand. Like, where did that's my money and you're just going to throw it away? I'm like, what do you think was going on here? Yeah, that turned into a whole big fiasco. But that was my experience in investing. And we did that again with another company that had already existed. And then it's actually the CFO's company that I was telling you about.
Oh my
it was his
God.
company, and he had it for a couple of years. It wasn't doing anything with it. So I'm like, cool, same deal. We'll invest money in it to get product, to do the advertising, to grow and scale it, the whole thing. And we did, and it worked great. It went from $0 in sales to $40,000 a month. I'm like, fuck yeah, dude, awesome. It's working. Let's keep going. And he's like, well, no, I didn't actually sign those papers, so you don't actually owe me. I don't owe you anything. I'm like, motherfucker. And this is after I'd spent $100,000 building it. I'm like, oh, okay, motherfucker. All right. So we ended up we closed that out and it went okay. But that was again.
Does he own that company or it sold or?
I ended up selling my 40% back to him. Yeah, but I had to get a lot of lawyers involved and do a lot of stuff because he didn't sign the paperwork. And his job at our company was to sign the paperwork. I'm like, so basically he purposely fucked me and all that. Because anyway, that's a whole other story. But yeah, so those are my two things that I've invested in as far as and they should have worked on paper. It should have worked great, but one guy was just too greedy and one guy was just too dumb. And I'm like, shit, well, now I'm the extra dumb guy because I didn't vet any of them properly. I didn't pay attention. I didn't set expectations. And there's a lot of things I didn't put into place that I know now that we've talked about on the podcast of setting roles and responsibilities, setting guidelines of where the money is going to go, be super clear about, hey, when are we going to use this money? How is it going to be paid out? And just being ultra clear because things that I thought I was like, oh, a lot of stuff we don't even need to talk about because it's so obvious that that's the way it's going to go.
Right.
The invested 20 grand and once that's paid off, then we'll take money out. But he just thought that was going to be a gift. I'm like I'm going to buy into something. I'm going to buy into something that doesn't exist. I'm like, okay, whatever. But I think ultimately the biggest mistakes I made was thinking that that they were thinking about it the same way I was, and they weren't. They were just thinking about it completely differently. And I should have asked the right questions. I should have structured the deal in a way to where those questions were in there ahead of time, already agreed upon. And then I wouldn't have had, any of those issues. Probably would have had other issues, but, I wouldn't have those issues.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, it's frustrating, man.
That's good. Thanks for sharing that because that's, wow.
Expensive lessons.
Yeah.
Fucking annoying.
But also people remember once you might be a greenie now, but then you're like, oh, I can start investing in people, blah, blah, blah. Oh, so now you have money doesn't mean you should invest right away. It's that's not how it works.
No, I mean, I'd love to
have your plan.
I would love to do that. That could be a great part of industry.
Yeah.
I would love to be able to invest in companies and help them grow and scale. But the problem is that if I'm not a majority owner, I can't control the way things are handled. And a lot of times in these situations, I'm like, dude, like the one guy, he's literally just too stupid to do business with. I'm like, fuck, man. This is a good deal. This is a great deal for you. All you got to do is be patient. And we'll make a fuckload of money. But he's like,
what would have that been? Less than a year of him?
Oh, it was 4 months.
Yeah, right. Because your first drop was $2,000 and it was minus 18,000. Wow,
Yeah.
That's crazy to me,
dude. I know it was.
And you put in that money.
Yeah, he didn't put in any money.
That's fucking mind blowing.
I know. I didn't have any money to pay me back too. He's like, well, I'll just buy you out. I'm like, okay, cool. It's 40%. I put in 20 grand. I don't need to make any money. I won't charge you for the fucking hundreds of hours that I personally put into doing this. but just the 20 grand that I put in, just pay me that and we're good. Fucking couldn't even pay me that. I'm like, bro, fuck. All right, well, and you know what he said? He's like, well, you put all that money in. I wouldn't have paid that much for this stuff. I'm like, bro,
you've got to be
fucking with the photo shoots and everything. Well, we paid too much for the photo shoots. I'm like, bro, these are your friends that we hired to do the photo shoot. Your friends that we hired to do the model. You're on set. I asked you how much to pay them, and you told me, and I gave them cash. So you were totally fine with it when it was my money. But as soon as you found out it was partly your money, it's way too much. Yeah. So we ended up. I just was like, dude, I don't want to fucking deal with this. Like, $10,000, fine. I'll take a $10,000 haircut. He's like, cool. I don't have $10,000. So I ended up giving this motherfucker like a 5-year interest-free loan, which is like $167,000 or $167 a month. I forget it's 3 or 5 years. But yeah, interest-free loan for fucking $10,000. That's where that ended up. And the motherfucker is late every fucking month paying me.
Still paying you?
Yeah, like fucking late all the time. Like this stupid motherfucker. Anyway, dude, yeah, you telling frustrated, like, God.
Guys, just bootstrap your shit. Figure it out.
But also too, a big lesson learned for me, man, I really got to do a better job vetting people because I'm like, I feel like I'm a nice person. I want to see the best in people. So I'm like, bro, this is a great idea. Yeah, you're a business owner. You do this. I'm like, yeah, this works. But they were not looking at it like that at all.
It's such a trip because I think it just depends. Maybe I'm a business owner, but I feel like if you invested money into me, you're investing into me. You know, it's just like I understand what you're doing. So it's like having what do we need to have that back of what'd you say? You said like milestones of like this payback, all that kind of shit, and making sure we're in the right direction. Because to me, it's like no brainer. But to some people, it's like, oh yeah, you give me 20 grand. Like what the fuck? You know?
Yeah, so that's the thing. Like a lot of people are only as faithful as their options, and if they think they can get away with something, a lot of people will.
Damn,
you know. But it's funny, like because I just rolled over on the first one. I'm like, dude, I don't fucking care. Like I'll lose money on it. We're moving so fast in other directions. I don't give a fuck about the 20 grand. Just get the fuck out of my life and go do whatever. And it was because that's how I handled it that the other guy thought that he could steamroll me with the other shit. Yep. And he actually said, I'm like, dude, why do you think this is going to work? Like, this is totally unfair. And it's like, well, you just rolled over on the other thing. I thought you'd roll over on this. So now I know I have to put your fucking head on a spike. I'm like, okay, so you say me being nice, now you think you can fuck me? Okay, now you're getting fucked.
Yeah, 100%. Link in bio in the description, going back into that podcast. Brian goes into a deep dive with that, so we'll leave that in the description. That was a gnarly podcast.
But it's just so frustrating to do because like they didn't win. Yeah. Neither of those guys fucking won. They could have won so much fucking bigger, like using me and our infrastructure and our capital and the things that we're doing and building and network. I'm like, they could have been fucking 7-figure brands already. And they're fucking around and it's like, oh, I made $1,000. Like, fuck you. It's so annoying, dude. Because I see the potential in everybody and in these things and I want to do it and I want to help. But then I'm just too nice and they end up fucking me over on this stuff. Oh, there's 2 books that I think. So Compensation. There's a book called Scaling Up Compensation by Vern Harnish. He also wrote a book called Scaling Up, which I'm reading right now. It's really good. But Scaling Up Compensation was very useful in trying to figure out like how to structure the compensation packages and like the buy-ins and the equity and the profit sharing and all that. It really goes in depth and detail. It's mainly geared for bigger companies like in the mid 8-figure range. But the principles are really good to set up in a smaller company. So that's what I'm using as a guideline as we're, moving into different territory with our company. And then as far as negotiation, because I've always been a terrible negotiator, but what I would have changed now in negotiating those agreements with those guys that I invest in their company, that book, Chris Voss, Never Split the Difference. I definitely should have read that book before, because the biggest lesson I learned from that was that just because you view a situation the same way or a certain way doesn't mean the other party views the situation a certain way. So you have to set certain metrics and checks to make sure that what you think is going to happen is actually what they agree is going to happen, and you're both viewing the same things in the same way, like a very clear understanding. So yeah, I think those are 2 books that would have really helped me unfuck those situations or not get into those situations in the first part, which is even better. But honestly, man, like that's just life. That's just business. And you sometimes get fucked over. I think everybody I've ever talked to in business has some story of getting fucked over, and it's sad, but I mean, that's just kind of the human condition is people are only as faithful as their options. And if you leave an out for somebody where things aren't structured and they think they can weasel a way out, oftentimes they will, depending on their character, you know? But that's why, like, you're a good person, you're smart, you wouldn't do that. But man, a lot of people will. And that's where I fell into trouble, is because I knew I wouldn't do it. And I just assumed that, you know, oh, these are my friends. Dude, they'll think the same way. No, they did not.
That's a trip.
Oh, goddamn annoying.
All right.
But I think investing, like, that's what I try to learn from other guys who are doing really good investments. Like Dan Fleischman has a really good strategy for investing. I try to follow guys like that because they're doing it well. And one of the things Dan always says is get everything in writing. I'm like, shit, yeah, seems simple and obvious, but when you're looking across the table from what you think is your friend and you think it's, oh, we don't even need to write this down, this is so obvious. Doesn't matter. Write it down. Yeah. Even if it's on a piece of paper, it doesn't matter. That's what people don't realize too. It doesn't have to be this big legal document between you two. You can literally write it in the email as long as they say, yeah, it looks good, I agree. That will hold up in court. It doesn't have to be this big legalese agreement, you know? If you have that, that's better. But you can still, like, if you both agree to an agreement and it's outlined, that's enforceable, 100%.
Damn.
Expensive lessons learned. Yeah. $120,000 that I've learned in these this podcast.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, man. That's crazy. I know. I'm going to be investing in the next 5 years. That's where I'll be at 31.
Dude, I think that's the evolution of an entrepreneur, though, is you're an entrepreneur, you're an operator, then you're a manager, then you're a leader, then you're an owner, and then you're an investor.
Mm-hmm.
Because then you can help other people with their companies.
I think you made a big point. And it's like even on the show, Shark Tank, best show. But like when they say like, love the company, but I have no expertise in this area and I won't do anything besides bringing money, I'm out.
Right.
Like
yeah.
It's true. Like
Smart.
I don't want to put my money into something where I can't bring any expertise because I don't know what's happening.
Yeah.
Then I don't know. It's kind of like what we talked about last podcast.
Well, you
like,
can't control the outcome either.
Mm-hmm,
It's scary.
no. And you don't even know what the process and system and processes are of that niche, that industry. And you're like, I don't know. I have the money to give you. I give you more, but I don't know what's going to happen with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So I always want to be that investor, but also like side partner too.
What I've learned being in these entrepreneur groups and talking to guys running, you know, companies way, way bigger than mine is that they deal with the same problems and the same shit. It's just, it costs them more money to solve it. You know, it's like the same problem, same solution, just the decimal points in a different place. But it's totally, I don't know, man. We all deal with the same shit as entrepreneurs, and it's a very lonely road if you don't talk about it. So that's why I love doing this podcast. I wish something like this was out when I was starting.
Right.
Like MFCO project was the closest thing, because Andy talked about, you know, the wins and the losses too. And man, I think if you're listening to this, you know, let us know how we can help more. And also maybe the best thing you can do is find people in your area that are other entrepreneurs or going through the same thing you are, and just have coffee with them or have dinner or put together some group where you guys get an Airbnb house for a few days and just chat about shit, because chances are, like, they're going through the same shit you are. It just feels so alone if you don't talk about it. And then you feel like you're doing bad and you feel like you're an asshole. And like, am I being a dick by thinking this? And through conversations with other people, you realize like, no, I'm actually totally right. But I think perspective's super powerful. But you got to surround yourself with the right people.
All right, man. Well, thanks for sharing, man. That was great. That's cool. The whole investing side, that makes more sense with the whole tech side, where it's like the valuation
model.
Yeah, it's
totally
like completely
different,
different compared to like, no, like, dude, anyone can bootstrap. You know, some people don't have anything. Start with $100 or like whatever. You can figure out how to get there, and eventually you will. You know, so surround yourself with the right people.
Yeah, exactly, man. Whether it's an investor, partner, mentor, employees, freaking anybody, dude. It's on the right path.
Oh yeah.
All right, man. Anything to the viewers out there?
Just guys, send in questions. Send a video of yourself. DM it to either me or Ryan, Kota Films, and Invictus
5326.
5326. DM us a video. Introducing yourself, what you guys do, and ask us a question. We'll cover it on a podcast, and we'll also like give you a shout out, and we'll keep your voice and the video of you on the podcast, so you can kind of see yourself on here and you get to answer the question. So
that'd be cool.
Man. Oh yeah.
All right, man.
Cool.
Shake and bake.
Shake and bake.